Good morning to all the distinguished audience who are connected with us today. Actually, thank you for joining us on this special program, Being Happy by Professor Pianjali de Souza. In the proceeding, please do allow me to briefly elaborate our key speaker for today. Professor Pianjali de Souza is a senior professor and a clinical psychologist at the Faculty of Medicine, University of Colombo. She is one of the most sought after resource person in the area of psychology. We are extremely grateful to her for accepting our invitation to help us navigate these extremely challenging situations around us. Without any further delay, I would warmly welcome our renowned speaker, Professor Pianjali de Souza. Over to you, madam.
Thank you, Vishan. Could you hear me and see me? Okay, the usual webinar question I'm asking you.
We do, yes. All okay.
So if there's something wrong with the audio, just let me know, okay?
Definitely.
Just cut across.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
Right. Okay, so I think most of you may have been at the previous talk that I gave, isn't it, Vishan, on resilience?
Yes.
So I welcome you again for another talk on another area of psychology, but very related to resilience. And I think this topic, which was chosen by my friend Sudarshana, is the ultimate goal that we as humans strive for, which is happiness. Everything that we do in our life, whether it's adaptive or maladaptive, we do it in order to be happy, isn't it? Whether the kinds of clothes that you buy, the kinds of friends that you associate with, or you like to associate with, the amount of deposits you have for your retirement, the vehicle that you buy or want to buy, the haircut that you have, or the trip that you're planning for. Even much more deeper things like the kinds of human qualities that you want to develop in yourself, such as kindness or patience or tolerance, or looking after your elderly parents, or being kind to your child, being kind to another person's child. All of these things, even though we may not know it, the things that we aim for, which we call as our goals, we aim for because we think it would give us happiness. Now, these goals that we have in mind for ourselves may not actually give us happiness, though we think it would. Now, if you look at an extreme example, if you look at Adolf Hitler, whom we spoke about in our resilience talk last week, he thought it would be happy for him if he killed all the Jews in the world, the Jewish people in the world. So he just killed 6 million people. He thought, well, that's going to make me happy, and I'm sure to make the other people also happy. Closer to home, you might think, well, scolding your spouse, or hitting your child, or running a rumor about your co-worker, or being nasty at your subordinate, or destroying somebody's reputation would make you happy. You think so. But we know that it may not be so. So today I'm going to talk to you about what happiness is, what does the area of psychology talk about it, and then I'm going to talk to you about how we can actually improve our happiness in an evidence-based way, the real happiness. There are so many books that say real happiness. So what is really happy, and how do we increase our happiness? And of course, this talk comes to us at a very challenging time in our country, and many of us may have very, very lessened amounts of happiness. But despite that, I do know that there are people, despite all the challenges that we have gone through and are going through in the country, they actually do have happiness. Like, for example, one of my friends was telling me about an elderly aunt and an uncle of hers whose 3 sons live overseas. So these people are in their late 70s. The husband had been having a kidney issue and then now going through dialysis. So because the sons are away, it is a son's friend who is also my friend's husband, who's helping this elderly couple to sort out the medical things. And what happened was, when my friend and her husband went to meet this elderly couple, she was saying, Priyanjali, the contentment they had. So my friend had asked, so how do you usually spend your day? She said, well, we get up in the morning, we cook together, we watch a bit of TV, but not a lot, certainly not those distressing teledramas. And we are very selective in the kinds of news that we watch. And every year we go on 2 trips. One to Kandy Dalda Maligaon, one to Anuradhapur. We have our own taxi driver who takes us, organized by our sons. And she was saying these people were really content, and they were not saying, oh, my children are overseas, they are not with us. We brought up 3 big boys, and where are they now? Nothing of that sort. And then we see people who have so many things going on in their life. They may be fabulously educated, exceptionally handsome or good looking or beautiful. They may be having a good job. They may be having really good career prospects. And then for them, it's just gloomy. And even we don't want to be in their company, isn't it? There are people who, when you meet them, they're like, you ask them how they're, and they're like, oh God, Mariana Beruin, and oh gosh. So then we see these 2 differences. So what is it that makes certain people happy? What is true happiness? And how do we get this true happiness, even though we are going through an exceptionally difficult time in our country? We also know that when somebody is happier, they are more able to bring about solutions to their life problems, including the problem we are having in our country. So we see that leaders at whatever capacity, doesn't have to be at politician levels who have clearly not done much for our country at all, as we all know, but leaders who are maybe protesting, who are trying to bring about systemic change in our country, if they are happier at whatever level, whether it's the village level, the town level, the city level, at an organization such as yours, if you are happier, you are able to take clear decisions which will benefit you, your people, your family, and ultimately our society and our country. So let me share my slides with you and get on with it. Is it coming out okay, Vishan?
Madam, if you can put it on full screen, it will be great. Okay.
Yeah, it's okay, na?
Yeah.
So let's see what is happiness. And so there are 2 types of happiness. Most of us are skimming on this first type that I'm going to talk to you about, which in psychology we call it hedonic happiness. So hedonic happiness was a term that was coined by a Greek philosopher called Aristippus, but not very well known. But I thought it's nice for people who are interested in, a little bit of mythology and history of these things. So if you're interested, just go and check out for this chap called Aristippus. So he said, well, he also believed in this type of happiness. So hedonic means it hits the head, right? It's just like a surge. It's a happiness that we get from indulging in our desires. It could be indulging in food, in coffees, and there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, it's okay, you can do that, but it's about satisfying our desires. For example, myself, I love going to a cafe, preferably by myself, having preferably an iced coffee, and sitting outside and watching the world go by, especially if there's nature. I just like this. So I have a few places in Colombo. There's not many places. There are cafes with trees around, but there are a few I have found out. And I go there at least twice a week, even now when I go to work, because it gives me, I indulge in my desire for that coffee high and, just looking around. There's nothing wrong with that. But we sometimes tend to overindulge in our desires, like a person who's got substance use, like use of alcohol or tobacco or drugs. A person who is indulgent in excessive shopping. For example, I have a friend of mine who was going through a significant financial issue, but she would still insist on spending at least 10 to 15,000 rupees a week on some clothes. And it's not as if she has many places to wear these clothes either. And I do not know how she gets this money. It's tough for her, but she needs these clothes for 10 to 15,000 rupees worth. So that's indulging in desires excessively. And they think that this would give them happiness. So it's a quick fix. You see, it gives you a quick fix and releases a particular hormone called dopamine in our system. So, for example, you go shopping, even if you don't have money, but you burn your credit card, you buy that thing, you put those clothes into those fancy bags that they give in these fancy shops, and you come out and it gives you a quick fix, like a dopamine. What happens is that later on, this chemical dopamine crashes and you're feeling really left helpless, worried, unhappy, and annoyed with yourself. A lot of people who like to indulge in hedonic happiness, this is indulge in desires, whether it's food or sex or shopping or whatever, has little interest in keeping to values. So think of a person who's got excessive sexual desires and have multiple partners, and they indulge in this desire. So when they don't keep to these values of how the society runs, it could give rise to difficulties for them in their own marital life or in other relationships, and could even lead to getting certain kinds of sexually transmitted diseases like HIV/AIDS. Or sometimes when you indulge in desires, such as, for example, your need to express your emotions and be angry, for example, you're not interested in keeping to the morals and values and ethics of a society where kind speech, goodness to others is not valued. So you do as you please, breaking the values and structures of society, and which even you may have set for yourself. Usually people who are highly intent on hedonic happiness has anxiety issues, could have depression, and could have issues in overcoming addictions, like addictions to alcohol, tobacco, excessive shopping, gambling, excessive lottery ticket buying, excessive sexual activities with multiple partners, etc. So it doesn't really give a great picture. But if you contain your desires, indulging in desires to a very innocent level, such as we all do, like that coffee or a little party with the friends, and a little bit of shopping when you're feeling a little down, and keep it at a structured level where you know it has not overtaken your life, then it's all right. But the true happiness is called eudaimonic happiness. I don't know whether I'm pronouncing this properly, but I've always pronounced it wrong, I think. It was coined by a very famous Greek philosopher called Aristotle. I mean, Aristotle was a fantastic human being, absolutely brilliant, worked on so many areas of science, including psychology. So he said, Aristippus' definition of happiness, called hedonic happiness, is so superficial. It just gives you a quick blip and that's it. It's like, you go and eat some really cheap Chinese food, which is really tasty because they got a lot of Ajinomoto and all sorts of stuff and really bad oils and all that. When you're eating it, you feel nice, right? It's like oily and but after some time, you really feel like a crash and you need to have some better food in your system. Hedonic happiness is like that. While eudaimic happiness is like this lovely lime piece I have put here. You must have seen mine like this. It looks, it's, in a way, it looks like a little bit boring, but actually, when you look at this picture of that orange and the pineapple, it looks so fresh and beautiful that it's lasting. It's good for you. It's an acquired taste sometimes to certain people. And that's what you call hedonic happiness. It's all about sensing good about yourself, being content about your life, having a sense of well-being, even if you don't have that party to go to or that shopping spree to go to. It's about that auntie and uncle I told you about, content with what they're doing, you know, their regular daytime work, having a little breakfast together, cooking their lunch together, having a very light dinner together, talking to their son who is abroad, and you know, watching a little bit of TV and going on the little trip, and very content with it. And that's what you call real depth happiness. It involves this kind of happiness that gets proud up inside of you, involves conquering obstacles. So we find that people who are genuinely happy, who's got this real deep-seated happiness, are a bunch of people who conquer obstacles, in fact. So it's not like, say, some certain celebrities who are born into lots of power, lots of money, lots of prestige, and then use that in order to grow some more. And on top of that, they're also having lots of hedonic happiness, like the kinds of lifestyles we see in certain magazines of celebrities who are partying away and seems to be having a great time, wearing beautiful clothes. But you don't know, right, whether it's true. Whilst hedonic happiness usually comes from within you when you have faced challenges in your life and conquered these obstacles. So even us going through this difficult life situation, if you conquer your mind and your difficulties during this time, whilst also giving to our country to bring about systemic change, whilst keeping your mind sane, you would have conquered certain obstacles in your life and our society, which would give rise to the development and the surge of happiness that we so wish for. So conquering obstacles, you wouldn't have thought about this, right? You'd have thought, oh, happiness is having a pay raise, having a promotion, going partying, going down south for a holiday, fun. Actually, that's very superficial. This kind of happiness is where you actually, it's about achieving growth. It's about personal growth. Like, for example, when I was younger, I had a lot of, when I was in my 20s, of course, where I had a lot of, you know, this hedonic happiness as a young person living overseas in India, going to university, having my own scholarship, and, you know, just buying and holidays and stuff like that. But when I was 25 years of age, or 24, just 10 days before my master's finals exams, my father passed away. And of course, my mother called me and said, my father is very unwell. You need to come and see him. And I told Ammi, like, why do I have to come? Because I've got 10 days in my final exams. I have 8 papers. So shall I come afterwards? But I knew something was afoot, you know. She said, no, you come and see your father and you can go back to your exam. And she sounded really distressed. And when I came to the airport, my aunt and uncle and my cousin had come to pick me up. And they said, I'm so sorry, Tati passed away, and that's it. So it was a humongous obstacle for me because my brother was very young, he was just doing his A-levels. My mother and my father was much older than me, and my mother was a housewife. My father had retired and had done a lot of charity with the money that he had, despite the fact that he had a very high job in the country, so there wasn't much finances. So as a 25-year-old, it was quite a significant challenge for me to accept this family responsibility. And of course, the fact that I was asked by my relatives to go back to India to an empty apartment in a scorching, heaty summer, you know how Indian summers are, sit for my 8 papers and come back. And I did that. And I had so many other instances throughout my life in the next 25 years, which were humongous obstacles. But conquering them with sanity and strength has given me a different kind of happiness, which I didn't have those days. So what I'm saying is conquering obstacles gives you great personal strength and contentment, which is a true happiness. And when you go through conquering obstacles, achieving growth, and when we say achieving growth, we're talking about developing the human potential you have, including qualities like patience, tolerance, taking wise decisions, being assertive, talking the truth at a time when other people are not talking the truth. When you do these kinds of activities, another chemical starts getting developed in your body, which is called serotonin, which is a much more slow release chemical as compared to dopamine. And serotonin is the one that keeps contentment, it's a steady stream of happiness, as opposed to dopamine, which is like a burst of happiness. For example, say you go and you have that, again, that oily, Ajinomoto filled Chinese food. It's like a fix of food and oil, and you're happy, but afterwards you don't really feel that way. But if you look at this kind of food on the left side, it's so fresh and looks so healthy, and it's so bright and cheery, and that's the kind of happiness that you do make. It kind of sustains you for a long time. It's fresh and all that. Now, a lot of our happiness is also based on fulfilling our desires. Maslow was a very well-known psychologist who spoke about needs, and he said that our happiness levels depends on what kind of level of needs that you want to be fulfilled in you. So, for example, if your needs are currently satisfying your shelter, need for fuel, need for gas, a need for food, need for security and safety, or actually that's a little higher, physiological needs, then your happiness is very gross, it's very crude. And most of our people are like that, all of us included. Having to stay, as I told you, I think I may have told this to you, or maybe I did your talk before that. I stayed in a full queue for 60 hours. That's a major, at a very basic level, we are trying to survive. One of my colleagues at the general hospital was saying that his patient came to him a little delayed for his clinic appointment, and he said that he and his family hadn't eaten for 3 days. They only had plain tea without sugar, and they had fainted, and the neighbors had come to see and given them some food, and after he got enough energy, only he had come for his clinic appointment. So people are going through massive physiological, just to sustain their body. So it's the food, the shelter, the fuel, the gas, transport. And when our needs are at that very basic level, the happiness that we get is also very crude and very basic. So you're so happy the moment you get your 10 liters of fuel, and you put it on Facebook, and a lot of people put likes, but that's a very crude level of happiness. But if our physiological needs are met the way it was met several months ago in our country, we then look at other needs to satisfy, which gives us great happiness, such as safety. So you might want to put a little wall around your house so that there are no predators coming in. You might get a little bit of a insurance for your medical expenses, or for your as a life interest for your children. So you're not building something more, and you feel good about it. It's a better kind of happiness when those needs are satisfied than if your food queue, fuel queue, gas queue needs are satisfied. Now, if your safety needs are somewhat satisfied, and you got a little bit of insurance, and you got a little bit of a wall around your house and all that, then you go for a third level of need satisfaction, which is social needs, which is, looking to form bonds and friendships and getting to a relationship, like an intimate relationship that will give you happiness, and have a partner that looks like you, who thinks like you and is like you, and having good friends, having genuine friends. We look for those things. Right now in our country, for example, we can't even think of those things, because why? We just have to stay in these queues. You can't. Usual weekends, we used to meet friends and do things with friends and with family. Here, the weekend is about which queue is the shortest, where I can get some fuel. So we can't really go to these deeper levels of happiness seeking opportunities, because the country system is putting us down. The fourth and a more refined level of happiness comes from esteem needs. When you know that you like yourself, you have self-esteem, you know that you have contributed to the society, to your organization, to your family, to your extended relative family, and you have kind of, in your eyes, you look like a person whom you will like. How many of you have that? There are people I've come across who should have esteem in our textbook, theoretically. Highly educated, in good positions, having a good salary, having that house, having that car, whatnot, but they don't like themselves. They have less confidence in themselves. They don't value themselves. The way they speak, the way they act, the things they do shows us that they don't value themselves. So esteem needs, if you truly like yourself, that's a great source of long-term happiness. Remember, we spoke about Hedonic happiness. That's the self-esteem gives you that. And finally, we talk about self-actualization is somebody who becomes the best version of themselves. Very few people get to these levels. We hear that people like Nelson Mandela, Mahatma Gandhi, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and so many other known and unknown people would have reached this level. But if you see, it's a pyramid, right? So most people are still scrambling at physiological needs and feeling happy when that need is satisfied. But remember that need satisfaction gives only a momentary amount of happiness, like getting that full in the full queue or having that bun, and that's gone. That happiness is gone. But as you keep on working up the ladder, safety needs, social needs, the amount of happiness that you can get increases. But the number of people who has a chance to go up the ladder, opportunities to go up the ladder, or even the techniques to go up the ladder is much less. That's why in happiness studies, we've seen that countries that always top happiness levels is the Scandinavian countries as well as New Zealand. So we see Denmark, Finland, Sweden, countries are exceptionally cold for 6 months of the year, and there's bright sunlight throughout the day, throughout the night, 6 months of the year. Despite that kind of a very strange climatic setup, their happiness is the greatest. Sri Lanka's level of happiness is 133 in the recent survey done. And mind you, there are 165 countries in the world that is part of this survey, World Happiness Study. So we are really low. And we can know why, isn't it? Because we are just scrambling in the physiological needs and safety needs, and that's where we are. So the systems of a country also therefore corresponds to a happiness of its people. So countries where it's safe, where there are no bomb scares or threats of bomb scares, where there is a very good social support system like daycare facilities, great public education system, etc., or public transport system, the people are happier because why? They're growing up this hierarchy of needs. So remember that for us to be happy, certainly there's tons of strategies we need to do, but so does the country that we live in be able to give it to us by in the way of structures and systems like good public transport, etc. But because we can't do much right now on the country systems, though I'm sure people are planning to get involved in changing our country in the next coming, which is fantastic. Let us look at what you can do personally to improve your happiness. Now, can we actually change? Now, I'm sure most of you who are here, maybe in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s as well. And, you may have tried various ways to improve your happiness. And some of you may have not been that successful. We find that past conditionings drive us. For example, we may be having certain personality quirks that doesn't make us happy. Like, for example, you may be in the habit of scolding other people. You may be in the habit of passing hints at other people. You may be in the habit of physically being violent towards your spouse or your children. Now, at the time you're doing this stuff, you might feel powerful because you are showing your power through aggression to another person. But later on, there will be regret coming. Now, we have seen that people who are in prison, 80% of people convicted for murder repented as if there is no tomorrow of doing what they did. Only 20% would be, who are mentally unstable and they think killing is okay, kind of a thing. So this is an extreme example of aggression. But if you look at the kinds of aggression that we show in our life, we do something and then we regret, but we do it again, and we do it again, and we do it again. Or addictive behaviors. Somebody who is taking alcohol or smoking, knowing that smoking is hugely related to getting a worse kind of a cancer, lung cancer, but you still smoke. Or getting involved in risky sexual behaviors, knowing that you can get HIV/AIDS, but you still do it. Knowing that it will destroy your committed relationships, you still do it. Spending money that you don't have on stuff, but you still do it. So that's what they call addictions, right? Now we do this over and over again because over our lifetime, our brains have got strengthened to do it. It's like a neural pathways. It's like, for example, sometimes you go towards rural areas and you see like a little footpath, but beside the footpath, there's vegetation. There's nothing there, but there's a footpath, and you know that somebody has been going on. A group of people has been going on this footpath. Our brains are like that in relation to our habits. We start making footpaths in our brain in relation to a particular habit. For example, when I was younger, maybe not even younger actually, maybe even good 5 years before as well, until a good 5 years before, I think I used to have chocolate cake. I had to have chocolate cake at least 3 to 4 times a week. And that's a lot of sugar. It's a lot of unhealthy stuff. But I had it. I had to have it. If I didn't have it, it was so tough. Life was so tough for me. Why? Because knowing the impact of eating that kind of stuff, being a psychologist, but still my brain had a well thought out, well trampled pathway of I need to have chocolate cake in order for me to get through the day, get through the week, in order for me to do well. Now, we think that, oh, I take alcohol, I don't think I can change now. I get angry, I don't think I can change in this lifetime. And we keep on going on that same path where the footpath now becomes a distinct road. Because when you go to rural areas, you also see not only footpaths, absolute roads, dust roads, where lots of people, even bullock carts have gone in it. Our brain has become like that as we get older. But the good news is you can rewire your brain. That's called neuroplasticity. Until very recently, people thought that we can't change the way our brain works. That you're born with a brain, it grows until a particular period of time, and then that's it. You're stuck with that brain, and you are that brain, and Pianjali is Pianjali. No. Research has shown across studies that if you really want to rewire your brain and to make certain new paths of healthy behaviors, you can change. Like I told you about my addictions to chocolate cake and unhealthy food. But now I realized actually that I'm changing, where about 12 years ago, when I had to go to Cape Town in South Africa for a conference, and it's a fantastic country with absolutely beautiful food, lots of beautiful food. So the first day I went there, I just went to the supermarket, I had all these iced coffees and chocolate cakes and I don't know, pork sausages, all the unhealthy stuff, which I really like. So I bought them and I ate them. And I realized the next day morning, when I went to the breakfast at the hotel, which was fantastic, my mind wasn't actually going back to those things, which was in abundance. My mind was instead going to the oranges and the smoothies and the good quality croissants and the green tea. My mind was just wanting that. It was strange. And I realized at that point that because I had over years programmed my mind to not want unhealthy stuff, one fine day, my entire being didn't want it, and my being wanted healthy stuff. So therefore, if you have certain kinds of mannerisms in you, personality quirks in you, which are based on getting hedonic happiness, which are very transient, you can reprogram your brain in order to have healthier strategies to get happiness. And let's look at what those are. So a lot of people love coming to these kind of motivational talks, and Then they go back and be their old self. Don't be like that. In fact, last week I was at an examination viva with some of our students on community medicine. And they have to go to a community, a suburban community in Colombo, and work with a family for a month to get their health status up. That's part of our MBBS curriculum. And after they do that, we have an exam with the students to see what they've done. So these students was telling me that they had gone to a household where there's amazing connection between, it's an extended family with the son and the daughter's families also living in this extended family setup, where the husband on his own had lost something like 30 kilos on his own. He hadn't gone to a doctor because they couldn't afford it. These are lower socioeconomic strategies. But he had been, looking at various YouTube clips and Googling things here and there and reading a little leaflet there. And he decided on his own, I'm going to quit going in my motorbike to work. And this is like before the social economic crisis. He decided to walk. He decided that in the evenings, he's not going to do carbohydrates. He's going to have more veggies, more fruits, less sugar. And on his own, over a course of a year or so, he had lost a tremendous amount of work and became very fit, very energetic. So, people who don't even have that much of opportunities to get information on how they can change their life, that's it. And here we are sitting with all this information about how to be happy in a proper way. And many people don't do it, isn't it? So let us decide today, after this talk, to implement these strategies into your life so that you move away from hedonic happiness, short-lived happiness, to eudaimonic happiness, which is long-term happiness based on well-being and contentment. So let us look at now some of the strategies that I talked about here is also the strategies that I talked about in my resilience talk with you all. The reason is resilience is obviously related to happiness, isn't it? Because if a person is highly psychologically resilient, that person is happy. And if a person is happy in a true sense, that person is resilient. So remember, all these states of mind are linked together. So the strategies I'm going to talk to you about is also, some of them are similar to what I talked about last time. It's okay, because why? Revisiting this information is so important. So the first strategy and the most evidence-based strategy, and the strategy that I would recommend to you the most in order to improve your happiness level, is to live in the present moment. You might see that most of the time that you're sad or angry or anxious is to do with bunches of thoughts that are going on in your head. Let me give you an example. When I was in India in the early 90s, of course, there was no email, there was no mobile phones. So you can only get connected to somebody on a land phone. So I was at university and used to do a lot of trips because India is a fantastic place to visit. And I used to tell my parents who were in Colombo, I'm going to Shimla, I'm going to Manali, I'm going to Dharamsala, I'm going to Calcutta, I'm going to Bombay. Those days it's called Bombay. I'm going to Bodh Gaya, wherever I'm going. And they would say, okay. And then they would say, okay, when you get there, give us a call. So when you go to a city after about 52 hours in a train, those of you who've been to India know, it's like sometimes the train trips to, say, Chennai is 52 hours. You had to find a booth where you put like a 2 rupee coin and take a call kind of a thing. So now, on one occasion, I had gone to some hill country, and my mother and father told me, when you get there, just give us a call to know that you got there okay. And now I forgot to do that when I got there, because I was so interested in the city. Then all these thoughts started coming to my head, like, oh my God, now when I call, Tati will ask me this, Ammi will tell me this, and they will tell, why are you not at university? You should be studying, not like tripping here and going here and going. So all these thoughts were sitting, and I was getting really annoyed with them as well. But anyway, I postponed this terrible call to Sri Lanka, and anyway, I finally did it. And the first thing my mother said was, how is it? Having a good time? Is it cold there? Totally different to what I envisaged and which I concocted and which I fantasized that they would say. Now, this is just one example of how we live, isn't it? And it is so common. It's so common. The other day, I was at a family function where I was looking at one of my relatives and I was thinking, oh, she's thinking like this about me. I don't think she's going to talk to me because she looked the other way. All these thoughts are coming to my mind. I was just watching these thoughts. And the moment we were at the function finished, she waved at me and she said, come, I want to sit with you and talk to you. How are things with you? So different to all the thoughts that popped up into my head and which I generated. Now, that is the reason that thoughts are actually is a great source of misery for us. But we give a lot of emphasis into our thoughts because we think that thoughts are facts. Are thoughts actually facts? Like, for example, if you get a thought that, oh, Sudarshan doesn't like me, Vishwa is a little bit weird, Pianjali is an oddball. Is it really true? Have you thought about it? Are your thoughts actually facts? Let us do a little bit of an example, a little bit of an exercise here. I encourage you and I invite you to think about a person that you had a relationship when you were young or a crush, but you're not with that person now. Say you were at tuition class or at school, or it could be a neighborhood boy or girl or somebody that you met at a swimming class or a network class or whatever class. But you had a crush on this person, or you had a relationship with this person, but you're not with that person now. So I invite you to bring to mind such a person, one person, not a lot, one person, okay? So bring that person to mind and your feelings and your thoughts about that person then. So it could be when you were 16 years at your tuition class. What were your thoughts about that person at that time? Now, think about that person as you are now. And what are your thoughts about that person now? Those days you thought, Ane, finally I have found my Ashodhara. Finally I found my Siddhartha. It's going to be like one of those fairy tale romances. Cinderella meets her prince and lives happily ever after. But now you think, oh my God, hundu velawata halu. Hundu velawata amma kiyapu de hatiyata mama giya hatan meyath ekka mama hitiya na mage jeewiyath iwarai. Now, it's the same persons, right? It's you and that person, then and now. But your thoughts are different. So therefore, thoughts are actually working hypotheses at a given time. They're just working hypotheses. We work with them. It can be right, it can be wrong. Only the situation, the way it unfolds, will tell us whether it's right or wrong. So when you live in the present moment, your emphasis, your commitment, the importance that you give to all these thoughts that occur in your mind gets reduced to a minimum. As you remember from my last time talk to you on resilience, I spoke at length about living in the present moment. I talked to you about how to live in the present moment, which is keeping your mind with the activity you're doing at the moment. So if you're cutting carrots for dinner, your mind is with the carrots. Your mind might wander away to the project you have to do, the dog you have to wash, the child's online work you need to do, or that horrible mother-in-law, or the brother you have, or the shopping you need to do, how horrendous the politicians in this country are. Usually what we do is, whilst cutting the carrot automatically, we are in those little, bunches of thoughts, we are there, but cutting the carrot, no. A person who is living in the present moment is somebody who brings the mind back to the carrot cutting process, or the toothbrushing process, or washing the dog process, or being with the meeting process, or WhatsApping a text process. They bring their mind back to the activity they are doing from the various thoughts that come up. So therefore, somebody who's living in the present moment is somebody who is aware of their current experience and they don't overthink it. For example, as this Japanese teacher says, leave the doors of your mind open, the front door and the back door. Let the thoughts come and let the thoughts go. Just do not serve them tea. We not only serve tea, we also ask them, would you like to have a ginger biscuit? Some ginger biscuit, some chocolate biscuit, piece of cake, we'll get some carrot cake. And we just, what we do is we grow these thoughts. We grow these thoughts into various kinds. That's the way I did when I went on holiday, or which you may be doing. So the first strategy in order to be happy is to reduce unnecessary thoughts in your mind, because we know thoughts are not facts. They are just concoctions of our mind. And the more such thoughts that you have popping up in your mind and you elaborate in them, the more restless you're going to be, the more angry you're going to be, the more worried you're going to be, the more stressed you're going to be, the more envious you're going to be, the more jealous you're going to be, the more anxious you're going to be. So what you need to do is reduce those thoughts. And how do you reduce those thoughts? By keeping your mind with the activity you're doing. Now, there are also other techniques. So the third technique is actually connecting with people in real time. Now, I'm also still working on this technique because I'm a very WhatsApp, Facebook connection type of person. Because I'm an introvert by nature. I'm not an extrovert. Maybe I'm like an ambivert. So some of you may be. And there's nothing wrong with that. Introverts are people who can't spend a lot of time with people. They need me time. They're happier with one person. They like to connect one-to-one as opposed to a bunch of people. They don't have a lot of time for themselves. While an extrovert is somebody who loves to be with people. You know, even if they go to the toilet, they maybe want to have somebody with them. It's an extreme example. But, you know, they just want to be with people. Just love it. They like partying and they're like, yes, let's do this, let's go out, let's do on the strip like that. Ambivert is a middle thing, where they love being with people, but they also need time for themselves. So now what we find is that whether you're an introvert, ambivert, or extrovert, it's good to have real-time connections with people as opposed to only screen time connections. It's so easy to be, because now we're always on WhatsApp. We don't really take a phone call and hear a person's voice. We also don't have much chance to meet people because we don't have phone, right? But at least on a phone call. So what we find is that when we connect with somebody real time, as opposed to writing a WhatsApp message and then responding later and responding, have you noticed that even when you do WhatsApp, if the person is online, status shows, and you're texting with that person, there's no connection, right? So in order for you to be happy, one of the second most important thing is social connections. The knowledge that you have people for you, resources, to give you resources, to give you advice, to give you care. Like for example, day before, one of my friends from school called me and said, you know, Pianjali, let's meet up. I would love to meet you. So we are meeting each other on Friday. Or one of my friends called me yesterday and she wanted some information about how to give some water bottles for the Aragalaya, site, etc. So the fact that she called me and wanted that information, how to go about it, made me feel good. So what we find is that if you have good, sincere, genuine friends whom you can call on for resources, for advice, to give you care, your happiness is good. In fact, we have found that people who are happily married, as opposed to unhappily married, have lesser chances of getting depression than people who are single. That's a research. But in order for you to be that friend to somebody, or in order for you to get fantastic friends, you of course need to be a friend first. Because we think that, oh, everybody should like me, everyone should invite me for parties, everyone should be there dropping their things and coming to me when I have issues, everybody should be sending me good morning texts and stuff like that. No, nobody has to do things like that to you. You are not God's gift to mankind, humankind, insect kind, animal kind. We are all human beings. The only way in which you could get friends, a fantastic friend circle, is if you are a friend. Do you smile with other people? Do you make eye contact with others when you speak to them? Do you send random text messages to people who you haven't been in touch with? Just as hi. I had a friend of mine who suddenly writes to me, Pianjali, hi, how are you? And so I write, like, I'm fine and all that. And she never responds back. So initially I was thinking that's really odd, right? Why does she say, hi, how are you? And then I write back like more details about my life, but she doesn't respond back. Then I realized that she remembers Pianjali and just, okay, randomly says, how are you? And that's sweet also, just wants to be in touch. But she's got little children and she's busy with her own business. So she can't really have a dialogue with me, but she just wants to say, hi, I'm thinking about you. Do you do things like that? Now, this is important even with acquaintances. It doesn't have to be only with friends that are close to you, that you go out with, that you call often. It can be even acquaintances. Maybe a colleague of yours whom you don't meet so often at work, or a neighbor, aunt, or uncle whom you don't see often. They're kind of acquaintances, right? They are like a circle removed from your immediate circle. Reach out to them as well. We find that when we smile with somebody, looking at the eyes with that somebody, just acknowledging somebody's presence, people feel good. And that is how you grow your social circle, which gives happiness to you. We also find a third technique, which is a very important technique, where we to have a perspective that rather than I want to be happy, I want to party, I want to go down south on a holiday, I want to go to New Arabia in April in order to be happy, my happiness, my happiness, my happiness. If there's a person, one of my friends used to say, I will be happy. In order for me to be happy, I will do anything. If you shift that perspective, which is a very juvenile, very basic, very crude way of looking at life, to a perspective where you try to find a larger meaning in life. Here again, we are going back to hedonic happiness, right? Your happiness will be larger. So what do you mean by larger meaning in life? I have a colleague of mine who's I've got permission from him to say this. Dr. Sajid Edrisingha. He is a senior lecturer at the Department of Anatomy at the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Sri Jayawardhanapura. A very nice young man who I met a few years ago at a conference. He and I were editors of that particular conference. And so since then, we're on Facebook. So I saw about 2-3 years ago, he had put photographs of them collecting plastic bottles and polythene bags and whatnot from beaches. Him and his friends. And then I also saw 2 days after them growing trees in various areas, like plants, in order for it to grow into trees in collaboration with the Sri Lanka Air Force. So I was really interested because I'm interested in climate change and sustainable living and green environments in my own amateurish way. So I texted Sajid and said, what kind of stuff are you doing? She said, madam, every week, at least 1 weekend a month, me and my friends, we choose a beach in Sri Lanka. It doesn't have to be only Colombo beaches. It could be they will go on to Kokilai, in Mullatiu district, like that. And they go and clean up they collect all the plastics, because some of these plastics actually come from Thailand and Malaysia, because when you look at the plastic bottle, it's not Sinhalese or Tamil or English, it's some other language. So it's just brought to our beaches, destroys our ocean life and our ocean vegetation, and it's so bad for the environment. So these young men, for 1 weekend, they collect all this and they give it for recycling. And he said, it's a tough job because it's very hot, right? There's no trees, obviously, in the beach, and the salty air, and it's so tiring. And other than that, when they were doing this, they had also met some Air Force officers through which they grow plants in areas where there's no vegetation in order to have rainforest kind of thing. Not a real rainforest, but patches of vegetation. So he said, it's so much better than partying with friends in the weekend. This brings so much of meaning to my life, the real happiness. So this is what I mean, larger meaning in life. Would you like to volunteer at the elders' home 1 weekend a month, where you go and talk to these men and women whose family have left them to die at elders' home? Are you good at painting? Are you good at playing the sitar or the tabla or whatever? Are you good at teaching English? Would you like to volunteer at a residential home for children to teach them these things, or even just to give them some company? So what we find is that the true happiness is not brought in by quick fixes like party, 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 trip, 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 shopping, 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 eating, 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 flirting, 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 but instead having larger projects in your life, which means meaning to others and yourself. Then you also find a fourth strategy of happiness is, of course, a spiritual happiness, spiritual practice. Now, of course, when we talk about spiritual practice, we're not talking about fundamentalism. We know that people who subscribe to fundamentalism. So what is fundamentalism? Is a mindset where people believe that if it's religious fundamentalism, because there can be other kinds of fundamentalism as well. In religious fundamentalism, people believe that their religion is the only right religion. Theirs is the best. Everybody else has lost the plot and going to rot in hell kind of attitude. If you have that perspective, of course, happiness is a far gone thing, because you can't have happiness coexisting in a mind of a person who looks down on others, who boosts his or her ego at the expense of others, and maybe even want to destroy others, like religious wars, because they want to ensure that their religion is the best. We're not talking about that kind of a thing. We're talking instead not on religiosity, but spirituality. So religiosity is where it's more like the external trappings of a religion, like a Bodhi puja, or the ritual at the Kovel, or at the mosque, or at the temple, or the church. And that's fine. That gives meaning. It gives a spiritual growth too. But when we talk about true, genuine spiritual practice that is gives happiness, it's about putting into practice the tenets of your religion. So if your religion talks about tolerance, loving kindness, brotherhood, if you actually put those tenets into actual practice, that is what is required, and that is what gives happiness. For example, yesterday, my friend, who was it? I actually, one of my friends, yes, she was talking about this queues and, people dying in queues and no food and, so many hours in a queue. And she said one of her friends had been at a queue where there was a little, like a very small one-room house where they said they didn't have a vehicle, let alone a bicycle. Maybe they had a bicycle, but this family had put out a little table in front, and every 2 hours they used to keep two flasks of plain tea with some disposable cups, so that people in that section of the queue can have a drink. And because this has been happening, this little family had little children, so this children used to get a bit of chocolate and like a banana and tap it on their head and a chit chat, and people used to sit around while the queue moved. And so my friend's friend had spoken to them, and they said that, in Islam, because it's a Muslim family, it's brotherhood and being open to other people. And they were actually practicing that. And the joy that they got, they were not thinking, like some people do, egula karthi, mata karne, vedak. No, it was not the haves and the have-nots mentality. They were like, we're very poor. Tea is also very precious to us, but we know you're suffering, so we'll give it to you. It's a practice of brotherhood and opening your house to others. So that kind of practices that comes from your religion, if you practice it truly, research have shown that it will give you happiness, including the practice of gratitude. We know that gratitude is a very rare virtue. but rare because many people are only grumpy, grumpy, grumpy. I don't have this, I don't have that, I don't have this, I don't have that. She didn't do this for me, he didn't do this for me. I should have got that, I should have been the first. I don't have it, I don't have it. A person who's grateful, on the other hand, is aware of the shortcomings in his life, but isn't emphasizing on that. Instead, is emphasizing on what he or she has. Okay, so I can't go and get that beautiful clothes. There are no parties happening anymore. I can't go down south for my weekend, but I do have my Netflix at home. Or I do have a pet at home who's so cuddly and who's so sweet to me. It's lovely spending my pet. Or now that I'm home, I could spend time with my family. And it's really fun. Like, for example, when I had my birthday last year, I was 50 years old, and I have a niece her name is Yara, and she's 9 years. So, birthdays but I love having birthdays. I love the big deal about birthdays. So my brother invited me for tea. All these pastries and stuff for my birthday, and because we couldn't go out because of the COVID and stuff. So my little niece, this 9-year-old girl who I love very dearly, gave me a little card, and she wrote, Nandi, it's your birthday, and all that. And she said, it's really great that we have the COVID, because that means we can spend time together at home like a family. And I thought, this 9-year-old girl, how she spun it, that okay, great, we have COVID, so that means we don't have to get dressed and go out and stuff. Let's do things at home, and I'm going to sing you happy birthday and play the piano for you, kind of thing. So that's the kind of spin that you need to put into life if you want to feel happy. If you are in a frame of darkness, I don't have, it's not happening, are you, you're not certain happiness is not with you. Then there are other techniques too. Lessening screen time. We find that people who are perpetually scrolling. I mean, I was really onto it some weeks ago. I was really scrolling and scrolling. I just lost my plot a bit. I think because of all what's happened in the country, as well as my own lack of management of my own mind. We find that scrolling is really, really unhappy for you. It gives a lot of unhappiness because one thing is it's mindless. Your mind is wandering here. So, for example, you're watching a particular clip and then you're generating all sorts of thoughts about it. Then you watch another clip and you're having your own fantasy land about that. Like, for example, I love Avengers and Transformers and Star Wars and those kinds of things. And whenever I watch Transformers, I really think I am Optimus Prime. Or when I'm watching Star Wars, I think I'm Darth Vader and nobody else. And if I watch Avengers, I think I'm Captain America, my favorite. And initially, those kind of stuff gives us a bit of a boost, right? Because if you think you're Optimus Prime or Captain America or Darth Vader, but it plummets. So what happens is when you do a lot of screen time, you lose being in the present moment because your mind is fantasizing and concocting and developing thoughts and really making you feel very restless. So have, all these new phones have digital well-being mechanisms where you can stop the number of hours that you're going to be on Facebook or overall data usage. Set something like that, but make tiny changes. I remember there was one time I was doing like 7 hours screen time a day, and I was so shocked. But I think it's also because I do my Zoom meetings on my phone and I watch YouTube clips, educational YouTube clips on my phones. But still, 7 hours is a humongous amount of time. So what I did was I decided, okay, for 1 week, I will do 6.5 hours a day. Then like that, really curtailed it to about 2 hours a day of screen. So when you work on lessening your screen time, which is excellent for your level of happiness, don't make drastic changes like, I am not going to go on YouTube from here onwards. It's not going to happen. You're going to go to it. Give yourself what you want. Give your mind what you want. Train your mind little by little. Okay? And when you have changed, reward yourself. So when I did my 2 hours of a day screen time as opposed to 7 hours, which I have been doing. I rewarded myself with something I liked. So therefore, this technique is lessen your screen time on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok clips, YouTube, Netflix, all sorts of things. Reduce it, because when you do screen time a lot, first thing is you become mindless. Second thing is you start comparing yourself with other people whose life seems so much more glorious than you, but actually it's not. If you're on Facebook, you're counting the number of likes and reactions that you've got, and maybe even gone a step further and comparing how many likes you have got compared to your colleagues' number of likes who post at the same time as you. We've all been there, myself included, but it's not good for your mental health. So curtail your screen time. We also find that physical exercise is a fantastic way to improve, because it releases another chemical, which is a beautiful chemical called endorphins. When we exercise, it gets produced and gets released onto you, which gives you a sense of well-being. So for me, when there were times when I don't feel too great in the morning because of some other challenge in my life, my mind says, okay, sleep some more, Pianjali, no need of going and doing your exercise. I do it anyway. So they find that 30 minutes of exercise 5 times a day at moderate intensity is what is required in order for you not only to be a healthy person, to be a fit person and maybe fit into your clothes better, but also for it to have happiness chemicals released into your system. Another strategy is spending time in nature. And I cannot emphasize the importance of that. Even listening to these clips of water drops, I don't know whether you listen to these things now on YouTube, there is water dropping sound clips or ocean wave clips. Not really ocean wave that seems like a tsunami is coming, but those calm ocean waves or the wind blowing things. Why is it that in many places that we feel soothed, that there are pictures of greenery or there are pot plants? We find that nature, especially the green color of nature, harita, that color, because trees emit oxygen in the daytime, there are certain plants that also don't put out carbon dioxide in the night, but also it's very good for you to have inside even in the night. Like I think like aloe vera, I think it boosts our mind. Seeing just that greenery, just imagine you going towards say Anuradhapura, that area, and those green paddy fields and the little streams that are going past. And you stop near the stream and you hear the gurgling sound of the water, the little fish. It's even thinking about that makes you feel good. So ensure to spend time in nature. I know in Colombo it's a dream, but there are places. When the fall issue was not so bad, one of my biggest thing that gave me solace was I love driving. I love driving and really. So I have my little roads, even during the green path where there are a lot of greenery. Then there's Japan, Sri Lanka friendship road where there's like a water and there's greenery. And I've got a few places that I go just to see, and I need to see that and to be in that. So if you don't have that opportunity, have pot plants. That orchid plants, the orchid flower stays about 2 months when it's blooming. Have that. You can have balcony, little gardens. People do that all the time now. Less concrete, more greenery is a surefire way to boost your happiness. Finally, visualization. Now, this technique seems contrary to this technique I told you about living in the present moment, but it is contrary. But if you feel particularly low, if you feel particularly unhappy, if you really need a quick dose of happiness, rather than being in the present moment, try visualization. Particularly visualize yourself being kind to yourself. You're going somewhere, you're being a kind person, good things are happening to you. Talk nicely to yourself in your own mind that things are going to be okay, Pianjali. You're going to do it. You were able to manage yourself 25 years ago when you were just a young person. Your father passed away 10 days before your master's exam, and you came here, you got your act together, and here you are now. And if you could do it then, with all the 25 years of life experience you had afterwards, you can do it now too. You got it. So talk nicely to yourself, motivate yourself. Imagine you being successful. Imagine you going up there in front of the board and giving that talk. We find that people who visualize, specifically not visualizing that you're like I do, that you're Darth Vader or Optimus Prime or Captain America doing their thing, because that's unrealistic, okay? But here we're talking about visualizing your success, visualizing you doing great, visualizing you overcoming obstacles, specific to specific situation, and constantly talking nice to yourself. So many of us talk nicely to others, but not to yourself. We say, "Ayo, Piyachi, how fool you have been. You are so fat and ugly. You had the third piece of chocolate cake because you're an absolute loser." Would you say those things to other people in your life? Of course not. You might think that way, but you're not going to say that way, right? For most people, you would say it's okay even if you had 3 pieces of chocolate cake. Not healthy for you, but still, let's get back on track again. It's okay. And you know, you may have put on a bit of weight, but you look fantastic. That color really suits you. That's how we talk to other people. Talk like that to yourself. Change your neural pathways. So today we have 20 more minutes, we can take questions. We discuss about happiness, the ultimate goal that we all have. None of us here would say, my ultimate goal is to be unhappy and distressed and gloomy, miserable mess. No, we all want to be happy. Happiness is much more tough in times of challenge, as we looked at this hierarchy of needs, the challenges that we are going through as a nation. But we know that despite that, we can rewire our brain, overcome past negative habits that didn't give us happiness to become a better version, happier version. We spoke about living in the present moment as the most powerful strategy for happiness. Then we spoke about social support systems. We spoke about having a larger meaning in life versus just being wanted to be happy, having spiritual practices, lessening screen time, physical exercise, spending time in nature, and visualization as techniques that would give you happiness. So I shall stop here now, and we shall take some questions.
Yeah.
If you have any.
If you have any questions.
There were some people who raised their hands. I don't know whether they had.
Yeah. Or else you can put it on a chat.
Some people raised their hands. Vishwa, I don't know if they.
Yeah, they can get the chance now. You can ask whether it in single or English, it doesn't matter.
You can even put on the chat anonymously if you don't want your name to be known, isn't it, Vishwa? Maybe people are really, really happy and there's nothing to ask.
Madam, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Yes. Just can I know whether being positive will always lead to happiness?
No, actually. So this is always thing about positive thinking, positive thinking, positive thinking, positive thinking. There was a little meme that one of my students had shared about positive thinking. It was this man who fell off down the stairs, and he goes, the man who fell off down the stairs goes, "Yes, I got down the stairs faster," but he's got himself a spinal cord injury. That's the extreme of positive thinking, right? What we need really is realistic thinking. So we don't want negative thinking. Unrealistic thinking we don't want, but we want is a true appreciation of who we are. Like, for example, I have a friend of mine who's a very dear friend of mine, a lovely, lovely person, good heart, but her evaluation of herself, of her physical looks, only she holds. Nobody else has that view of her. So one day we had gone to Crescat, and at Crescat there are these pictures of these young, beautiful girls, models on the pillars. So there was this beautiful, beautiful girl, and we were at that time old enough to be that girl's mother, kind of a thing. And my friend looked at that picture and said, Pianjali, the only difference between me and that girl is my skin color. I'm a tad bit darker. Now, this girl was old enough to be our daughter, and certainly she was like a top model, didn't look like any of us. And I thought she was joking. So I started laughing, because we joke sometimes, right? And she was serious. She really thought she was this girl. And that's excessive positive thinking, because deep down inside of her, I know she feels inconfident about the way she looks, but she jacks it up with a totally wrong evaluation of her. So we don't want that, Vishwa, because that doesn't actually give happiness. It's like people who say, oh, everybody loves me, everybody invites me for parties, everybody can't get enough of me, I have so many friends, but inside they know, actually they don't. So positive thinking has to be done in a way it's realistic too. Knowing your limitations plus strengths. Yeah. So when you do visualization as well as a strategy, do it within your strengths. Now, if you, for example, haven't done any inventions, but now you're visualizing getting the Nobel Prize for curing cancer, and you're going to Oslo in Norway in a first-class ticket on Sri Lankan Airlines with the entire village coming with you to get that Nobel Prize for cancer cure, might not actually be there because, for example, you haven't done sciences for your thing, you haven't done any inventions, and you don't even know what cancer is. So be realistic as well. Is the answer.
Thank you.
Okay, so there's a question.
Do you have any other questions?
Okay, so there is this question. What would be the best technique because student, being a young student who is looking at the world, to practice during this ongoing situation? Okay, so of course, we have to acknowledge that it is not easy one bit. This is an extremely unusual situation that has given uncertainty into our life, and it is unjust because of whatever has got unearthed about the corruptions and the mismanagement and all. We all know that, we don't have to go and analyze that. So knowledge that this is not an easy time for us. But to know that there are two ways in which we can handle this. We can get sucked in, like the marshy land, man gets sucked in when a person gets stuck in a marshy land, or we can decide to save ourselves from this mess and the others. My decision is the second. I'm sure it's yours too, all of us. Then how do we save ourselves and the others? Of course, we need to do our own bit. For example, whether it's in protesting or signing a petition or writing a Facebook page or talking for justice and all that. Do all of that. That would make you strengthen that you are bringing about change, particularly for youth. Youth is very involved in social changes. And of course, do things also to protect your mind so that negativity doesn't flow into you. How do you protect your mind? By these techniques that we spoke about. Happiness techniques. There are also other techniques that I spoke about in a previous talk I had with your company. I think there's a similar talk in my YouTube channel to which you can get more techniques. So if you just put Pianjali Dissoys on YouTube, you get my channel. There's a lot of techniques too that you can do. Because we have not much time, I'm not going to go through all those techniques with you, but I invite you to read those techniques. So basically, how do you go about this time? Work on being the change you want for this country, but not let negativity take hold of you by using the techniques, psychological techniques that we've spoken about. Deborah. Okay. This is other questions. Madam, what are the best ways to overcome the stress and concentrate on a goal? Well, it is present moment awareness that we spoke about. Concentration is built when we are living in the present moment. Our concentration is very low when our mind wanders here and there. When we are at a meeting, if you're thinking about a child sandwich. When we are brushing the teeth, if you're thinking about the meeting. When we are with the child, if you're thinking about washing the dog. When you're washing the dog, you're thinking about, are you going to cook noodles or rice for dinner? That's not the way to go forward. The way is, when you're with the child, you're with the child. When you're brushing the teeth, you're brushing the teeth. When you're at the meeting, you're at the meeting. When you're washing the dog, you're washing the dog. Certainly your mind will wander away, but bring it back every time it has wandered. When you keep on doing that, the mind gets strengthened. A strengthened mind is a concentrated mind. Read more on that. There's more again on my YouTube channel on Living in the Present Moment. Okay, sometimes being vocal about your happiness in these challenging times can be criticized by people as being insensitive or disconnected from reality. Yeah, you don't have to be like rubbing your happiness on everybody else. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes people tell me like, they get annoyed with me also because that I even do these topics. They're like, why are you talking about happiness, Pianjali? There is no happiness and don't talk about happiness. So then you don't want to rub it on them, right? So, for example, it's like, for example, you go to somebody's relative's funeral and it's not your relative, so you're going to be like eating sand and distress, isn't it? They may be eating sand and distress, but you don't have to be. But because out of respect for them, you don't show that you're thrilled to bits about your life. So therefore, I suggest that if you feel well-being, happiness, and your mind is okay, your mind is strong, you are kind of got your things under control, however tough it is. When you're with people who are cheesed off and angry, you would want to rub your happiness on them because they're going to get cheesed off with you. But at the right opportunity, you can give them some tips. I remember last week I was doing a talk for the Sri Lanka Medical Association on resilience, same talk that I did for you all. And I had put the webinar notice on my Facebook. This is public seminar, webinar. And one person on my Facebook got very annoyed with me. I said, how can you be resilient? How can you be happy? In this time, you have to be angry and you be aggressive. Then I realized that this person has kind of lost the plot. So I was not going to argue with her because she's in pain, she's suffering because she can't feed her children. So why do you want to add to it? But afterwards, I posted the clip on my Facebook, hoping that she will learn something. So don't be on somebody's face if you are feeling unhappy and they are feeling unhappy. Okay. Vishwa, I'm just taking your questions. It's easy that way, no?
Yeah.
I'm not allowing. So happiness depends on our level of satisfaction, right? So how can people tell if you're happy or not? We can become depressed in certain conditions, and some individuals may not like us at that moment. What should we do in those circumstances on our level of satisfaction? So how can people tell if you are happy or not? We can become depressed in something like. But there's a lot of questions in here, I think. I'm not quite sure, Ramanathan, but I think there are, well, basically, how can you tell you are happy or not? The question is very simple. Do you feel it? You know when you're happy and you know when you're not. So if the world seems very dark, if you feel hopeless more often than not, if you feel worthless more often than not, if you don't have pleasure in most activities that you do in your life, if your mood has dropped low, these are all indicators of depression and sadness. If you have this, you know you are not happy. The other question, I'm not really sure what this means. We can become depressed in certain conditions and some individuals may not like us at that moment. Maybe if you can write that again for me and explain, I will answer your question. Until then, I will go to another question, which is, Tusitas, there are some guys within us with Mama Poro syndrome. They don't listen to the whole story. They come to their own conclusions. What sort of advice can you give them? Sometimes it's difficult for us to cope with them. Yeah. So there are quite a few of them because they think that they know it all and you should all listen to them and others don't know. So what I do is I just don't respond to them. So if somebody comes, and there are lots of such people, isn't it? They're like pundits, they know everything. The world starts and ends at their feet kind of people. They walk as if they have just swallowed a bicycle handle. You know, the world is on their shoulders. Now, with those kind of people, trying to show your perspective may not work unless they respect you. When they come to respect you, they listen to you. Now that takes time. So what I do is with these kind of individuals, if I really have to stress a point at a meeting, I would say, but then they have that, oh, I'm so important attitude. And then I just look somewhat blank. And then I go like this. So, basically what you're doing is you're not feeding and growing that tendency in them. If you start engaging with them and arguing with them and pushing your perspective with them, in a way they become worse. So what I do is I just let them talk whatever they want. And if it is not a big point, I just let them stop there. And I have stopped talking. They have stopped talking. Now they feel odd because there's no response coming from here. That's the way that you can curtail some of these people. Easier said than done, because we get triggered in their company. We also want to say our point. We also get annoyed because they are like the pundit in action. We need to calm ourselves. Another situation with these kinds of people is if they are your immediate supervisor or your colleague and you have to work together and they have this pundit syndrome and you need for them to work together, it's tough to manage these people. That I understand. Okay, let's see. So, okay, so that's that. So thank you very much for valuable thoughts, madam. Madam, we're always worried right now with the hopeless future for ourselves and our children. How much we try the same thoughts dominate our mind. Appreciate you. Yes, it's a thought. It is hopeless. It's. I mean, I would like. I was born in the 1970s. So of course, I was born in the early 1970s. I didn't know about the palm polio, which is about to be a baby compared to what we are going now. But since 1983, early 90s, I was born into a war. Plus late 1980s, there was insurgency. Then the JVP issues, the killings, most of us didn't have universities to go to as well. Then all this stuff. So we born into and lived through a very tough time. Most of us who are older. So, but this situation is quite significant. But I try to find hope that this is a situation where we have been given as Sri Lankans to change our system. Because this corruption and injustices and what has been going wrong in our country didn't happen only with the people who we are pointing fingers with, isn't it? And it didn't happen just a few years ago. There are so many people involved at their little levels who also contributed to it. For example, the person at the parking slot who doesn't give his yellow ticket but takes our money, and we are also okay to it. We keep a blind eye. So what I'm saying is to you, think of this as an opportunity to change our system once and for all. And the opportunity is coming in a few days' time, in the next few weeks. Take it to see whether we can change it, because we have to change it. But it is difficult. So while you're acting on changing, whether it's been part of a protest or a petition or writing something about it on a social media or whatever you do, protect your mind by the practice of present moment awareness, because the practice of present moment awareness is the most powerful strategy to prevent negative, hopeless thoughts overtaking you and harassing you, really. The above question was asked not by Kaush. Okay. So everyone's situation is different with others. Someone forced within positivity will be stressed. How can we handle this kind of situation? Everyone's situations are different with others. Okay. Someone forced in positively. I'm not quite getting that question. What is your best advice to have a happy family life in a situation like this, without arguing or complaining about? And that's a different webinar altogether. Because this is about, you're asking about family life, isn't it? So But remember, your family life begins with you. Not your spouse, not your children, not your in-laws, not your parents. It begins with you. So if you can become a better version of yourself and become a more mentally healthy person, certainly your system will be changed. In fact, in psychology, we call that kind of a therapy systemic family therapy, where we find that if one එක පුරුකක් පෞල් පද්ධතිය වෙනස් වුණොත් මුළු පද්ධතියම වෙනස් වෙනවා. So even if you can't change the entire bunch of gloomy, grumpy, annoying, argumentative people in your life, in your family, there are ways to do that, but this is not the webinar for that. But even if you can't, if you put into practice what we discussed today and the resilience tactics tips that we spoke about last time, because of you changed, others in your family could also change. Meditation, how helps to happiness and how it ends with people, sleeps, everything. I'm not quite sure what this means. The meditation, how helps to happiness and how it ends with people, leaves everything. I don't understand that question. I'm sorry. What should I do when I lose hope in life? If you feel very, very hopeless, I would recommend that you see a mental health professional, just talk about it. So there are many services. The government sector has psychiatric services in main hospitals. Private sector have psychologists and psychiatrists in the main hospitals. Then there are hotlines like Subitrio, CCC hotline. Then the National Institute of Mental Health hotline 1926. Why I'm referring these kinds of services for you is because you have said that you feel hopeless. Now, all of us feel hopeless at a given time in our life. But if you feel that you're particularly hopeless and your hopelessness is not going away for a long time, I would suggest that you get a little bit of professional help, and that's perfectly okay to do that. Does happiness not clinging to expectations? Yes, ultimate happiness is not clinging to expectations or not expecting anything from anyone. You have to train your mind to get to a level of not expecting anything from anyone. You can't get it straight away, but you can get there. I was, for example, a person who had a lot of expectations from many people, many life situations, but over the years of practicing all these techniques that I have told you, I practice all of them, particularly personal moment awareness, I find that my expectations are much lesser and I'm that much more happier. Okay, then there is another question. Everyone's situations are different with others. Someone forced to think positively to handle some situations. No, I don't understand that. What ways that we can handle our work targets and future goals, happy thoughts, or getting angry during these hard times? I think to this person, we spoke about strategies. We talked about happiness today, so that's about happy thoughts. I recommend that you get a copy of this recording and listen to it again. That would give you information. I'm aware, Vishwa, that we have run over time, but I will take this one question, okay? Mostly we live with people we like to associate, who behave like us. But sometimes, whether we like or not, we have to live with the people who don't like us. So can you please explain? We have no choice. Like as you get older, as you go into more avenues in life, you'll be bombarded with people that doesn't like you, that you don't like to be with. That's it. When you're younger, school, you decide who your friends are. There will be one or two bullies who are annoying the life out of you, but still you have it. You have the comfort of your home. You start a job, you decide who you want to be with, a little bit. As you grow up, there will be people who don't like you, who want to make sure you trample, you fall, people who are envious of you, especially if you have a lot of things going for you. But learning how to live with them is another way, skills. It's about relationship management. Now that's another webinar. I'm sorry, I can't give you relationship webinar management tips. Relationship management tips here because we finish our time. So you should shall we call it a day, Vishwa?
All right. So rest of the questions will be sent to Professor Pianjali D'Souza via email. So we will And also, on behalf of Calbe International Organization, I would like to extend a very hearty vote of thanks for Professor Pianjali de Souza for sharing your important findings and knowledge with us today. And we thank every one of us for being with us today, and have a great day. Thank you.